Chapter 3.
Hi.
Jenna called as she crossed over rough ground, her stride quick and purposeful. Grayson gave a tight nod and kept working.
Are you sure you're planting the hedge in the right spot?
His jaw clenched before he glanced up. I believe so.
Maybe you should check with Mr. Miller. Hedges normally frame the landscape.
Your job is inside. My job is outside, he gritted. Let me do mine.
It's my job to oversee all aspects of the bed and breakfast, which includes the grounds as well.
Grayson sat back and wiped the dirt from his hands. What the hell had he gotten himself into? Never again will he attempt a project that required hiring someone. Employees were a nuisance, and more often than not, a hazard to his health. Even now, his chest tightened as this overbearing woman told him what her job was. He knew bloody well what her job was. Just 10 minutes before, he had been prepared to go and find Jenna and set everything to rights. But now, he just wanted to dig and forget, and for her to go away. Was that too much to ask? It was as if she brought out the worst in him, a giant, snarling beast pushed against his chest, spurring him. I'm following my landscaping design, Grayson replied. There's no reason to concern yourself. It'll be completed in time for the opening. Jenna didn't look convinced, but she ceased. Somehow he knew it wouldn't be for long.
Do you know where I should park my car?
Grayson was relieved she changed the subject. He was reasonable enough to be hospitable to the annoying woman. For now. He stood and walked around her, giving them each a wide berth. Meet me over at the garage, he said. There is an extra space that you can use. She said a quick thank you and hurried to her car, which was still parked at the front door. He watched her cross the yard. Even her gait was purposeful. It had none of the soft sway that some women had. No, she was anything but soft. Grayson met Jenna at the garage, located 50 yards to the side of the mansion, and he opened the door for her. When she had parked and stepped out, he handed her a remote. This remote will open each of the 5 garage doors. Each door has a separate button. I'm sure you can figure it out, he said.
I'm sure I can.
She agreed, taking the remote from his outstretched hand and looking around.
Are all of these Mr. Miller's cars?
She asked with a hint of awe. Grayson glanced over at his luxury and extremely expensive cars. While he enjoyed driving them, he didn't use them all that often. Yes, was his one-word answer.
Will he need the space I'm parked in?
No, it's yours to use.
Then he's on property,
She asked, seeing as all of his cars were accounted for. Grayson took a breath and said, Yes.
Will you take me to him?
I have work to do, Grayson stated, turning to leave. He didn't know why he didn't just set the record straight right then and there. She grated on him, that was why. Let her believe what she wanted. Jenna reached out, touching Grayson's dirt-filmed arm to stop him. She quickly yanked her hand away. Grayson took a step back to distance himself, keeping his gaze steady on her. She didn't cower from his intense stare. Grayson knew he had a way of looking at a person to make them feel 2 inches tall, not that she wasn't on the short side to begin with. He didn't use the stare often, but it had helped with negotiations at times. When her brandy-colored eyes stared back at him without flinching, he was impressed. A little. I'll be on my way, he said, turning away again.
What about meals?
She asked before he could escape.
Is there a cook, or should I go to the store?
It's just you and me, he stated.
What about the man who left here this morning?
That was my friend, Remy.
Do your friends visit you here often?
No, not often, Grayson replied. Jenna gave a nod, but he could tell she was stewing about something. He had a feeling Mr. Miller was going to hear about it.
I'll head to the store and make dinner tonight. Will you join me later?
Grayson wanted to say no, but instead said, Yes. What time? Being hospitable wasn't all it was cracked up to be.
Will 6 o'clock be okay?
That'll be fine. He glanced at his watch. but had to wipe it clean before he could read it. It was 4 o'clock now. That'd give him enough time to plant one side of the maze's frame. He was already hungry. "I'll see you then." She gave a nod and opened her car door. "Wait," Grayson said, halting in mid-step. He couldn't let her pay for the meals at his house, for his bed and breakfast. She had him so turned around that he nearly forgot. He pulled out his wallet and extracted a few bills. "Buy whatever you need." Jenna took the 3 $100 bills with a quizzical brow.
I can't accept this.
"Why not?"
You're an employee.
she stated, holding out the money.
I'll expense the meal as soon as I figure out the banking information.
Grayson didn't take the money and instead turned his back, replying as he walked away. "Then use the money until you figure it out."
Jenna stared at the retreating form with pinched lips. The man was a continued source of aggravation, and she still hadn't asked him his name. Ugh! Jenna settled into her car and started the engine. What was he doing walking around with over $300 in his pocket? There was something about that made her cautious. Could he be trusted? What if the money came from an illegal avenue? She'd have to keep her eye on him until she figured out exactly who he was. A few questions over dinner could prove helpful. And for him to have friends visiting on company time was completely against the rules, if there were any rules. She had a feeling that might be another item on her to-do list. Either way, she was secretly happy he gave her money. The truth was, she was tapped out. This job had come at the nick of time. Now she could make a decent meal instead of buttered noodles. Her culinary skills weren't the greatest, but she did have a few decent recipes in her repertoire. She had nearly asked the surly gardener if he could cook, but with the layer of soil on him, she wouldn't want him anywhere near the kitchen. It was really too bad he didn't clean himself up. She had a feeling there was a decent-looking man underneath all that dirt and scruff. If only he had some manners under there, too.
It was 5:30 when Grayson put away his gardening tools for the night. He rubbed his knotted shoulders as he walked back to the house. He had a half-hour to scrub the dirt off. Some dirt was just too stubborn and only came off after a good hour-long soak in his hot tub. God, that would feel great right now. But it would mean he would miss dinner. Not only would that be rude, but he was starving. On cue, his stomach growled fiercely. Grayson walked up the flight of stairs and into his room. He peeled off his clothes that were caked with soil and tossed them into the laundry basket. As he headed to the bathroom, he noticed something in the middle of his bed. On closer inspection, he realized it was a towel folded to look like a dog. If the dog wasn't so adorable and unexpected, he would think it ridiculous. He gave the dog a second glance and then continued to the bathroom. He turned on the water and stepped in. Jenna had obviously made the silly dog, and it gave Grayson insight into her forte. He had read her resume before giving the okay to hire. He knew she wasn't as qualified as some of the other applicants. Grayson rarely hired on qualifications alone. It was the person who added to the success of the business, not their puffed-up resume. While he had never met Jenna, he had liked what the recruiter had to say about her. And, really, this was a bed and breakfast, not a billion-dollar corporation. He didn't need the manager to have a long list of credentials. The silly dog would fit in with the bed and breakfast atmosphere. He'd reserve judgment on the girl, which was becoming quite difficult. Impossible, really. Woman, not girl. She looked young, even with her severe matronly bun that he could tell wanted to escape from its confines. Her auburn hair was way too thick to stay restrained. If he had to guess from her resume history, Jenna was in her mid-20s and an utter pain in the ass.
Jenna was just putting the finishing touches on dinner when the gardener appeared looking at least clean, if nothing else. He gave her a mumble of greeting which she returned with the same amount of enthusiasm. She watched as he made himself at home at the kitchen table, thumbing through some of her papers. "I'd rather you didn't look through those," Jenna said, carrying a pan of lasagna to the table, placing it next to the salad. His hand stalled as if frozen for a moment before he quickly jerked it away.
I actually didn't want to see them. Force of habit.
Force of habit to be nosy? She'd have to find an office that had a lock and key if that was the case. "Would you care for something to drink?" she asked. "There's water, soda."
Beer.
How typical,
I'll get it.
he said, stretching as he made his way to the refrigerator.
Would you like one?
"No, thank you," she nearly snipped. He stared at her and then shrugged.
What would you care for?
"Just water for me,"
There's wine if you prefer.
he said, heading over to a wine rack placed prominently near the kitchen's entrance and stocked to the hilt.
It'd go better with the lasagna anyway.
"I'd rather not drink while on company time," she said. He cocked his head.
You're not on company time. This is dinner.
"I plan to work after."
If you're going to live on property, you'll have to give yourself downtime.
He said, selecting a bottle of red wine and bringing it to the table with a corkscrew.
Working around the clock isn't healthy.
Jenna quickly stacked the papers onto her laptop and set it on the wide window ledge for later. "I will once I get a little further along," she said, snatching the unopened wine bottle from his hands and stowing it back in its original spot. "This is Mr. Miller's wine. I'll add wine to the shopping list for next time if you want it." He let out an extended breath.
I'd rather have a beer anyway.
He said tersely as he grabbed a bottle from the refrigerator and slammed it onto the table. Jenna jumped. Must he be so surly all the time? It was becoming more and more difficult trying to be pleasant to him. She'd give it another shot, however. He had to thaw out eventually. Perhaps thaw wasn't quite the right word. He simmered underneath the surface, ready to boil over at any provocation. Well, she'd worked hard on dinner, and she was going to try to get through this without succumbing to heartburn medication from his irritability. "I hope you enjoy dinner," she said, taking a seat across from him. His stare was flat.
Thank you for making it.
"Would you like salad?" she asked, lifting the bowl to pass.
Thank you.
He said again, taking the bowl and depositing a generous serving on his plate before returning it to her. At least he was saying thank you. It's an easy sentiment to forget when you have boorish manners.
After Jenna's wine pronouncement that nearly tipped him over the edge, Grayson was at least able to remain civil enough to her during the salad course. It was difficult, but he could see she was trying to be cordial, even if she didn't want to be. Every time she looked at him, he thought she was going to reach out and smack him. But then her face would smooth, and she would ask about the mansion or something equally neutral. It was tedious and mind-numbing. All he wanted to do was eat and then sleep. The way this conversation was going, he'd be sleeping in his salad in no time.
"Would you care for lasagna now?"
Yes, thank you, Grayson answered, holding his plate out while she scooped a large square piece. Thank you, he said again, and deposited the plate in front of him. Was that all he was going to say for the rest of the night? Thank you? This was becoming painful, he thought. He knew it was partially his fault that there was a wide, jagged ridge between them. If he wanted to get through dinner without falling asleep or strangling her, he had to somehow bridge the gap. I see you're putting your hospitality skills to use, Grayson said, attempting a smile.
"Do you mean dinner?"
No, but it is good, he said. I meant the towel dog you left on the bed.
"I only placed one on Mr. Miller's bed,"
she said, confused. Oh, God. Here we go with the Mr. Millering again. I know, I thought it was cute.
"What were you doing in his room?"
Showering. Her mouth gaped open, which wasn't a very good look for her, although neither was her pinched face, which happened to be her next expression as she scowled at him.
"There are a dozen or more bathrooms in the house,"
she complained.
"Why would you shower in there?"
Yet another moment arrived when he should have probably set the record straight. But she was so frosty and uppity that he felt the perverse need to lock horns. Because that's my favorite shower, he said, settling back to watch her bluster.
"You are not allowed to shower in Mr. Miller's room."
Really?
"Really?"
Grayson stood with his hands fisted on the table, glaring down at Jenna. I think you should mind your own business.
"This is my business,"
she said, standing to mirror his stance, glaring just as fiercely. Your business is to run the bed and breakfast, not to tell me where to shower, he gritted.
This property is now under my management. You had best get that through your head. You will not shower in Mr. Miller's room,
She stated again.
Do we have an agreement, or do I have to go above your head?
Grayson's lips curled. Do your worst, he said, snatching his plate of lasagna and his beer before stalking out of the kitchen. He stormed into his bedroom, slamming the door closed. He tossed the plate on the side table, too infuriated to eat what looked and smelled like a great-tasting dinner. But he knew it'd only taste like ash in his mouth. He should have told her, but he'd be damned if he would now.
Jenna woke up late the next morning and therefore got a late start on the day. She wasn't going to feel guilty. At least that's what she told herself. The little voice in her head, on the other hand, was hard to ignore and was telling her it wasn't a good idea to sleep late being so new to the job. But she had spent a good chunk of the evening tackling the list. She'd made some progress, although she still didn't have a name for the company. Instead, she had filed papers with Mr. Miller's name and the company's name as to be determined. It would at least get the ball rolling. She had also stayed awake to see if Mr. Miller would ever show. He hadn't. She had a strong urge to peek into his room to see if he had somehow snuck past her. She didn't. The last thing Jenna needed was to accidentally wake him up and ultimately meet him for the first time in his bedroom. And with her luck, he'd be the kind of man to sleep naked. No, she wasn't going into his room again. Jenna quickly showered and dressed for the day. She picked up her laptop from the nightstand and headed downstairs to the kitchen. Placing the laptop on the table, she looked out the window. The gardener was planting more hedges in the middle of the yard. Even though she still didn't understand his plan, that's not what gave her pause. There was a pretty blonde sitting near him on the grass. Jenna sighed. She was definitely going to have a talk with him. He couldn't have friends, and now a girlfriend, visit him while on company time. It's just not done. That added another concern. Did the blonde stay overnight on property with him? She couldn't say for sure. When he had come to dinner the previous night, he took off almost immediately with a plate of food and a scowl on his face. Jenna knew why. She was all for him taking a shower. He needed it desperately, but not in Mr. Miller's room. There were at least a dozen bathrooms that she knew of, probably more. He could choose a different one. Well, needless to say, he hadn't been very receptive and stormed off. It brought up another question. Was there a housekeeper? Jenna couldn't find a speck of dust, so someone had to clean the place. She doubted it was Mr. Miller or Mr. Gardner. That was what she'd started referring to him as, since she still didn't know his name. A horrible fail on her part. Jenna sighed. Clearly, she and Mr. Gardner were going to have to sit down and talk. First, she was going to find out a little bit more about the blonde. Then she would address a list of concerns with Mr. Miller. Jenna stepped out into the sunshine and took a deep breath. She marched across the lawn toward the couple. The blonde looked up and saw Jenna heading her way. She smiled. At least she seemed pleasant, and was prettily made up, Jenna thought, the complete opposite of her grisly, earth-layered boyfriend. The energetic blonde bounced up from her spot on the grass and reached out to shake Jenna's hand.
"You must be Jenna,"
she said. Her big blue eyes were filled with bubbly warmth.
"Grayson's told me so much about you. I'm Maya."
Her words nearly knocked Jenna back a step. Maya knew Mr. Miller, and he told Maya about her? Odd, considering he hadn't taken a minute to even introduce himself. "It's nice to meet you, Maya," Jenna said. "When did you speak with Mr. Miller?" Maya tilted her head to the side with a questioning look.
"Today?"
"I've been trying to find him," Jenna said, scanning the landscape to see if she could spot him. "Where did you see him last?"
"Right here."
She answered with the same questioning look. "Darn! We keep missing each other. I'd better go find him," Jenna said, turning to head back to the house. "It was nice to meet you." If she hadn't slept in, she wouldn't have missed him. Her failures were starting to accumulate, and it was only her second day on the job. She wanted to cry.